I don't believe in ghosts, but after that night, I don't believe in the living either. That's the only way I can start this. Because if I don't say it outright, you won't understand why my hands still shake when I pass a hospital at night. You won't understand why I quit a job I once loved, or why I unplugged every TV in my apartment. And you definitely won't understand what you're about to hear. It was supposed to be routine. Another quiet night shift in a half-empty hospital, where the worst thing that usually happened was running out of coffee filters. Hospitals at 2 a.m. aren't like the ones you see on TV. They're dull humming places, more vending machine buzz than drama. But that night, something was wrong, and I felt it before I could name it. The monitors flickered, just slightly, like an old film reel slipping on its track. The patients were too quiet, no restless groans, no machines chiming for attention. Even the air smelled wrong. Not just antiseptic and bleach, but something metallic underneath, faint but sour. I tried to ignore it, told myself I was tired. But then I caught my reflection in a darkened window and, for half a second, I swear it didn't move when I did. You'll say I was over. You'll think maybe it was the fluorescence playing tricks. That's what I told myself too. But then, something happened in room 304. I can't know. I won't describe all of it here. Not yet. Because once you picture it, you can't unsee it. All I can say now is this. What I saw that night will change how you look at hospitals forever. Every quiet hallway, every darkened room, every still, silent patient will wonder if they're really as lifeless as they seem. Before I explain what I found in 304, I need you to understand how normal that night began. How ordinary it all seemed until the ordinary broke. So let me take you back to the start of my shift, before the monitors flickered, before the smell crept in, before I learned the dead don't know where stay dead. People romanticize hospitals on TV, bright scrubs, witty bench, the occasional dramatic code blue, but the reality of a night shift is fluorescent lights buzzing like angry bees in coffee gone bitter on a forgotten warmer. That night was no different. At least at first. The parking lot was nearly empty when I pulled in. My old Civic, the only car under a flickering lamp. The building loomed against a sky so black it felt painted on. Inside, the world shrank to sterile corridors and the hum of distant machines. Night shifts have their own rhythm. You learn to read the quiet to sense when something's off, even before the monitors tell you. I clocked in, nodded at the security guard, Jenkins a retiree, with more stories than teeth then, headed to the nurse's station. Jenkins grinned like always. Graveyard ship, he said, with that dry laugh of his. Appropriate name. Funny, I muttered, taking my badge back. I didn't laugh. At 2 a.m. the hospital feels abandoned, even when you know every room has a patient. The halls are longer, the shadows deeper. Even the vending machines seem louder, spitting out candy bars with a clunk that echoes too far. Routine is your lifeline on nights like that. Check charts, adjust, IVS, make rounds, sip bad coffee. I walk the halls, letting the familiarity soothe me. The scuffed tiles, the faded motivational posters every day is a second chance, the faint antiseptic tang in the air. But even amid the comfort of routine, small cracks showed. A clock outside Wing C ticked 3 minutes behind the others. A file cabinet drawer was left open, though I was sure I'd closed it earlier. And Wing C itself, the closed-off floor, felt different tonight. Warmer, somehow, though the air conditioning hummed steadily. We always joked about Wing C budget cuts shut it down years ago. And rumor claimed it housed the bad cases, the ones the hospital didn't want to explain. I'd peeked through its tiny window once, seen only dust and shadows. Still, the idea of those empty rooms always made the hairs on my arms stand up. I poured another cup of coffee, bitter enough to make me wince, and tried to laugh at my nerves. Hospitals are weird at night. They breathed in ways you don't notice in the daytime. You catch whispers that turn out to be vents. You catch movement that's just your own reflection. You tell yourself stories so you don't think about the silence. Around 3:15, I did my second round. Room 212's patient snored softly. Room 220's monitor beeped steadily. Everything looked normal to normal. Even the restless ones were still. The machine's steady rhythms began to feel rehearsed, like they were performing. In room 228, an elderly man opened his eyes as I adjusted his 4. They were glassy, unfocused, but he whispered a word anyway. My name. I froze. He'd been unresponsive for days. No one had told him my name. And the way? He said it raspy. Almost, Reverend Mate. My skin crawled. I tried to laugh it off later, telling Jinkins maybe I'd imagined it. He only smirked, like he'd been waiting for me to say something like that. They hear more than you think, he said, before turning back to his crossword, but I couldn't shake the chill. Something was off in those empty holes, hiding beneath the antiseptic and fluorescent hum. Something waiting. I didn't know then how deep it went. I didn't know that. By the end of the night, every patient in that hospital would be standing, and none of them would be breathing. Hospitals thrive on ordered charts, lined up like soldiers, machines programmed to predict every blip of a heartbeat. When that order falters even slightly, it claws at the back of your brain. The first thing I noticed was a missing chart. Room 220's file, which I'd reviewed only half an hour earlier, was gone. The metal clip on the door hung empty. I checked the nurse's station, the rolling cart, even under the counter. Nothing. I told myself someone must have borrowed it, but the night shift was then just me, Jenkins at security, and Carla, the float nurse, who was on break. I made a note to find it later and moved on. As I turned the corner into Ward B, a bed alarm shrieked. The sound ricocheted down the hallway like a gunshot. I sprinted to room 214, the source. The bed was empty, crisp sheets, undisturbed. No sign anyone had been there. My skin prickled. I checked the patient list. No one had been assigned to that bed for weeks. The alarm stopped on its own. I stood there, heart hammering, listening to the hum of the fluorescents. Then, faintly, I heard another sound, a slow creak, like a door easing shut. It came from the end of the hall, near Wing C. I told myself to stay calm. Hospitals are full of strange noises. Pipes groaning, doors shifting as air pressure changes. But when I peeked toward Wing C, the heavy door leading to the shuttered floor was ajar. I knew it had been locked earlier. I'd checked out a habit. Like always. Carla, I called, my voice echoing in the empty space. No answer? I pushed the door closed, wincing as the hinges moaned. The padlock was still dangling from the latch, snapped but not secured. That made less sense. Back at the nurse's station, I found Carla scrolling her phone, earbuds in. She looked up when I asked if she'd been near Wing C. She shook her head. Haven't left the lounge, she said. I didn't tell her about the alarm or the missing chart. Saying it out loud felt like giving it power. The next anomaly was quieter but worse. As I passed room 228, again the elderly man who'd whispered my name glanced at his monitor. Flatline. The machine beeped steadily, but the screen was a solid green line. I stepped closer. The man lay still, chest unmoving. No rise, no fall, but the monitor still showed a perfect heart rhythm. I tapped the screen. The line blipped, flickered, then returned to its steady beat. My pulse raced. I leaned down to check for breathing. Nothing. His skin was cold. Then, as I turned to call a code, a whisper brushed my ear. My name? I spun around. The bed was empty. The man was gone. A clatter echoed down the hall, like a tray being dropped. I ran, heart in my throat, and found nothing gust a rolling cart against the wall. By the time I reached Jenkins at the front desk, my breath came in sharp bursts. I told him I'd seen something strange. He gave me that same knowing smirk. Patience, Wanda, he said. Even the dead ones are. I stared at him, waiting for a punchline that never came. The silence stretched too long. Something in his eyes told me he wasn't joking. Jenkins didn't elaborate, and maybe that was worse than a punchline. His eyes flicked toward the security monitors, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw. Fear there quickly masked by his usual half-smile. I told myself exhaustion was playing tricks. Still, when I returned to the halls, every sound seemed amplified. The whir of the air vents, the squeak of my shoes on tile, even the quiet hiss of an IV drip. I did another round, partly to reassure myself, but the hospital didn't feel like the same place anymore. The corners seemed sharper. The hallways stretched farther. The fluorescent lights flickered more than before, casting odd shadows that didn't quite match their sources. In room 232, a woman with pneumonia sat upright in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her monitor read a healthy 72 BPM, but her chest wasn't rising. I watched for 10 full seconds. No breath, no movement. Just glassy eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. I stepped closer. "Ma'am, are you all right?" No response. Then the IV bag swayed slowly like someone had brushed past it, but I was alone in the room. A chill ran down my spine. I backed out quietly, promising myself I'd check again soon. Farther down, the doors to the surgical ward creaked open. I peered inside. Every bed was empty, except the monitors weren't. They blinked and beeped as if patients were still the reach screen displaying vitals for bodies that weren't present. "Carla," I whispered, but my voice sounded thin and distant. Suddenly, a burst of static erupted over the PA system, followed by a low murmur. It wasn't words, more like reversed speech, a sound that made my teeth ache. I clapped my hands over my ears until it stopped. When I lowered them, the corridor ahead had changed. 2 beds that hadn't been there before now lined the hall, both occupied, their sheets covered stiff forms, faces hidden. My breath hitched. I edged closer. The first sheet slipped off on its own, revealing a man whose face I recognized, Mr. Ortiz, a patient who had died 2 nights ago. His eyes were wide open, unblinking. The second form shifted. The sheet slid back to reveal an empty space, no body, just the outline of one pressed into the mattress. That was when the lights flickered out entirely. For a moment, the hospital plunged into a darkness so complete it felt physical, like a weight pressing against my chest. Then, one by one, the emergency lights hummed to life, casting everything in a dull red glow. In that light, I saw them. Every patient, those who should have been sedated, those who should have been unconscious. Even those who'd flatlined hours ago stood in the doorways of their rooms, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Their chests did not move. A dozen pairs of eyes stared at me, empty and unblinking. I took a step back, their heads starting to follow, perfectly in sync, as though pulled by invisible strings. One of them, a young woman I'd checked on earlier, raised her hand. The motion was stiff, mechanical. She pointed toward Wing C. I don't know why I followed. Maybe because doing nothing felt worse. Maybe because their collective gaze pinned me in place. As I approached the Wing C door, the padlock dangled loose again. The door stood ajar. Inside, the air was warmer, humid, almost suffocating. Dust motes swirled in the beam of my flashlight. The hall beyond Wing C wasn't as I remembered. It was longer, stretching impossibly far, lined with outdated medical posters and equipment from decades past. The floor tiles changed color halfway down, as if I'd stepped backward in time. Somewhere ahead, A faint giggle echoed, a child's laugh but distorted, like a recording slowed to half speed. My radio crackled. Jenkins' voice came through, panicked. "Where are you? I'm losing your feed, Kamrazar." "They're empty. You're not on them." I glanced up at the nearest security camera. The little red light blinked. I waved. Nothing. Then I saw movement at the edge of my light, a shadow slipping into a side room. I followed, my footsteps muffled by the strange stillness. The room was a supply closet, long abandoned. Shelves were bare except for a single patient file on the floor. I picked it up. My name was on the cover, dated for tonight. Before I could process it, the PA system screeched again, this time with a single clear phrase, whispered and drawn out. "They're already gone." I stumbled back into the hall and froze. Every patient now stood in the corridor behind me, lined up shoulder to shoulder, blocking the exit, their heads tilted at identical angles, mouths slightly open but producing no breath. Behind them, the lights flickered again, and for just a moment, I thought I saw someone else among them. Someone I recognized too well. My own face, grinning from a lifeless body in a hospital gown. Word count, 1,000. I'd seen enough horror movies to know what that moment should have been. The part where you run, where survival instinct takes over and your legs move faster than your brain. But my legs didn't move, because when you see your own face among the dead eyes vacant, lips curled in that terrible frozen grin, you can't. Your body locks up, like maybe if you stand still long enough, reality will snap back into place. It didn't. The patients began to move. Not forward, backward. In unison, they shuffled away from me down the impossible Wing C corridor, their bare feet whispering against the tiles. Their heads lolled, their arms hung limp, yet their movements were perfectly synchronized, like puppets retreating into the dark. I should have been relieved. I wasn't, because they weren't retreating at random. They were leading me deeper inside, and God help me. I followed. The hallway stretched longer with every step, as though the hospital itself was unfolding into something endless. The walls grew stained, the tile cracked, and the faint smell of antiseptic gave way to rot sweet, cloying, unmistakable rot. Somewhere behind me, the PA crackled again, Jenkins' voice, ragged. "Get out. Do you hear me? Don't let them take you where they want you." No, not anymore. Static swallowed the rest. I gripped the file I'd found tighter in my hands. My name, written in neat block letters, stared up at me. Inside were pages of vitals, heart rate, blood pressure, notes about sedation, all dated for tonight. The final entry was a timestamp only a few minutes in the future. On the status it read, expire. A cold sweat slicked my skin. I shoved the file under my arm and pressed on, telling myself I'd hand it to Jenkins, shove it in someone's face, demand an explanation, but the hospital had other plans. The corridor opened into a ward I'd never seen before. The walls were a sickly green, paint peeling, beds lined up against the far side. Each bed was occupied, and each occupant was me. Dozens of versions of myself, lying under thin blankets, eyes closed. Some younger, some older, some healthy, some riddled with tubes and bruises. A grotesque timeline of my life mapped out in hospital beds. I stumbled back, gagging. One of them twitched. Its eyes snapped open. My eye, and it whispered, "Late for your shift." All the others opened their eyes in perfect unison. A chorus of shallow inhales filled the ward. No exhales, just the dragging in of air they'd never release. I bolted. The beds rattled as I passed, like something unseen was crawling under them, shaking the frames. The whispers followed me out. Shift, shift, shift. I slammed into another corridor, lungs burning. The emergency lights flickered and went dark again, plunging me into blackness. When they came back on, the hall had changed. No longer wing, see, no longer anything I recognized. The tiles were gone. The floor was raw concrete, cracked and wet. The walls pulsed faintly, as though alive, veins of dark liquid threading through them, and the smell stronger now, decaying brine, like a morgue. Drowned at sea, and there, ahead of me, stood Jenkins. Only not Jenkins. His uniform was soaked, clinging to his body, and his skin had that same waxy pallor I'd seen on the patients. His eyes were clouded, pupils blown, yet he smiled as if we were still two co-workers on a routine shift. "Had to see it for yourself, huh?" he said, voice gurgling like water trapped in his throat. "Told you. They wander, even the dead ones." I shook my head, backing away. "You're not." "Not what?" He stepped closer, and his shoes left wet prints on the concrete. "Not alive? Neither are you." I tried to argue, but the words caught in my throat because I could feel it now deep in my chest. A hollowness where my breath should be. My lungs dragged at the air, but nothing filled them. I wasn't breathing. I hadn't been for a while. My knees buckled. The file slipped from my grip, pages scattering. Every one of them was blank now, except for the word expired stamped in red. I looked up at Jenkins' Zor, the thing wearing Jenkins' face. "What do you want from me?" He tilted his head, water dripping from his hair. "Want? No. This isn't about want. This is about shift work. We keep the beds filled, always filled. When one leaves, another takes its place." My stomach dropped. "You mean," he grinned wider, revealing teeth too sharp, too many, "your turn." Behind him, the patients reappeared. All of them. The ones from earlier, the ones from the ward, the ones who should have been sedated or buried. They filled the corridor wall to wall, shoulder to shoulder, their dead eyes locked on me. And in the center of their ranks my double, the one I'd seen before. It stepped forward, mimicking my every move. When I staggered back, it staggered forward. When I gasped, it opened its mouth in the same shape, though no sound emerged. The crowd parted, creating a path straight to me. My double kept coming, its expression twisting from blankness into that same horrific grin. Jenkins leaned close, his breath rancid with rot. "Clock in!" And then they rushed me. Cold hands gripped my arms, my shoulders, my neck, dozens of fingers, clammy and strong, holding me still. My double reached out, palm flat against my chest. The instant it touched me, a pain like ice water flooded through my veins. My vision blurred. I felt myself slipping, like I was being dragged out of my body and forced into the one standing in front of me. And for a moment, God help me, I saw through its eyes. I saw myself thrashing against the horde, eyes wide with terror. I saw Jenkins, watching, satisfied. I saw the hospital not as walls and corridors, but as a vast, endless warren of rooms filled with countless versions of the same ritual, repeating forever. Then the grip faltered. The double staggered back, flickering like a faulty projection. The PA system erupted one last time, not static, not whispers Carla's voice, frantic and clear. "Run." The light surged bright white. The patients froze, and I tore free. I don't remember how I got out, whether I ran, whether the halls bent themselves to release me. But 1 second I was drowning in a sea of the dead, and the next I was bursting through the hospital's front doors into the night air, gulping oxygen I wasn't sure I could even use. The silence outside was deafening. No alarms, no whispers. Just the empty parking lot lit by a flickering street lamp. And behind me, the hospital loomed quiet, innocent, exactly as it had been. The night's air was sharp and cold, like it had been waiting just for me. I staggered into the parking lot, shoes slapping against the asphalt, each step echoing in the silence. For a moment, I let myself believe I'd escaped, that I'd outrun whatever nightmare the hospital had become. But then I noticed the quiet, not the ordinary, peaceful quiet of early morning, but an oppressive stillness, a vacuum where sound should live. Even the distant hum of traffic was gone. The world felt hollow, unfinished. I fumbled for my phone, fingers trembling. No signal! No time. The screen flickered with static instead of the home screen, like the hospital's monitors had infected it. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, not my face, but the grinning doubles, its lips curling wider with every heartbeat. The hospital doors hissed closed behind me, sealing the darkness within. Their glass panes reflected the parking lot lights, but in the reflection, they weren't empty. The patients were there, lined up just inside, their faces pressed against the glass, watching, waiting. I blinked, and they were gone. Somewhere, a single car alarm chirped then, stopped mid-sound, as if smothered. The street lamp at the edge of the lot flickered, casting long, warped shadows that didn't match my movements. One of them bent the wrong way, its head snapping to look directly at me before slithering back into place. I wanted to leave God. I wanted to, but my car keys weren't in my pocket anymore. I don't remember dropping them. I don't remember losing them. I only remember the sudden certainty that the hospital had taken them back. Behind me, the doors slid open again, though no one had touched them. A faint hum drifted out, like an old fluorescent bulb warming up, then a whisper, stretched and distorted. Shift's not over. The sound seemed to seep into my bones, pulling at something deep inside me. I turned, and for the briefest instant, the parking lot around me dissolved. I wasn't outside at all. I was back inside, standing in the endless Wing C corridor, the one that shouldn't exist. Then it snapped back. I was outside again, but I couldn't trust what I saw. A movement at the far end of the lot caught my eye. Jenkins stood beneath the broken street lamp, his soaked uniform dripping onto the pavement. He raised one hand and beckoned. His grin gleamed even in the dim light. I took a step back. The lot stretched longer than it had before. The exit farther away. My breath clouded the air, except it didn't. There was no mist, no warmth. I realized I wasn't breathing again. A horrible thought rooted in my mind. Maybe I never left the hospital. Maybe I was still in Wing C, still on that floor that shouldn't exist. Maybe this parking lot, this cool night air, was just another room in the labyrinth, another illusion to keep me moving. My pulsive. I even had one pounded in my ears. Jenkins tilted his head, voice rolling across the lot. Beds don't stay empty. Behind him, the hospital windows lit up one by one, each revealing a bed occupied by me. Infinite versions of me, each wearing a different expression. Fear, anger, confusion, resignation. A macabre mosaic of my own face. The PA system's static crackled to life again, though I couldn't see any speakers outside. Carla's voice emerged, faint and distant. If you're hearing this, it's too late. The world warped. The hospital's edges bent inward like a photograph curling in heat. The asphalt beneath my feet rippled like water. The smell of antiseptic returned sharp and overpowering. I ran anyway. I don't know where I thought I was going. Maybe the exit? Maybe the horizon? Maybe anywhere but there. But no matter how far I sprinted, the hospital loomed in my periphery. Its parking lot stretched on endlessly, each step taking me nowhere. Then the lights all went out. Complete darkness swallowed everything. And in that darkness, a voicey my own voice spoke from every direction at once. Clock in. The lights flicked back on. I was standing at the nurse's station. My scrubs were dry again. The monitors hummed. The halls were just halls. Carla waved casually as she passed. Jenkins leaned at the front desk, sipping bad coffee. Like nothing had happened, but the smell lingered, that faint trace of rot beneath the antiseptic. And when I looked at the monitors, Every patient's name had been replaced with mine. Outside the window, the parking lot was empty, except in the reflection on the glass, rows of patients pressed their faces to the panes, silently screaming, "I don't believe in ghosts, but after that night, I don't believe in the living either." Because sometimes the dead don't wait for you to join them. Sometimes they clock you in before your shift even starts. The next morning, daylight poured through my bedroom window like nothing had changed. My alarm buzzed, my coffee brewed, and for a brief moment I almost believed it had all been a nightmare, a trick of fatigue and fluorescent lighting. But when I opened my locker at work that night, my own name tag stared back at me. On every single hook, row after row of identical tags, each one scratched and worn in different ways, like they'd been hanging there for decades. I slammed the door shut and checked again. Only one tag now. Just mine. Carla waved when she passed me in the hall. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Jenkins was already at the security desk, sipping coffee. He greeted me like nothing was wrong, but his hand trembled as he set down the cup. I wanted to ask him what he'd seen, if he remembered last night at all, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I forced myself through my rounds, avoiding Wing C, avoiding the reflections in the glass. The hospital was perfectly ordinary again. Almost. Room 232's monitor still blinked steadily, but the bed was unoccupied. I found the missing chart from the night before, back in its place like it had never vanished. And yet, every so often, I'd catch a flicker just at the edge of my vision of a patient where there should have been an empty bed. The worst was the whisper, quiet, almost tender, riding on the hum of the fluorescent lights. Shift's not over. I haven't told anyone. Who would believe me? A tired night shifter claiming the dead don't stay put. It sounds like every urban legend you've ever rolled your eyes at, but the hospital remembers. It breathes when no one's watching, and I think it marked me. Last night, as I drove home, the world outside my car windows didn't look right. Street signs were written in my handwriting. My reflection in the rearview mirror lagged behind my movements by half a second. When I closed my eyes to sleep, I didn't see dreams. I saw corridors. Endless corridors, lined with doors that all bore my name. So I'm telling you, not for sympathy, not even to warn you, just so someone else knows. Because if you ever work a night shift hospital or anywhere, you need to be aware of the quiet moments, the flickers on the monitor, the bed alarms with no patience, the smell of antiseptic that can't quite mask the rot beneath. If you hear your name whispered from an empty room, don't answer. If you see a hallway that seems longer than it should be, don't follow it. And if you ever see yourself among the dead, don't let them touch you. Some shifts never end. Some beds never stay empty. And maybe, as you're reading this, you've already started to feel it, the weight of the silence around you, The sense that something is standing just out of sight. That's the curse of the night shift. Once you've glimpsed the truth, the world never looks alive again. So, go ahead. Tell yourself hospitals are safe, that dead patients stay dead, that a flicker on a monitor is just a glitch. Tell yourself it was just my imagination. But when the lights flicker tonight, and you hear footsteps in an empty hole, you'll remember this story. You'll look over your shoulder, and you'll wonder if the beds near you are really empty, because the dead don't wait. They clock you in.